Cartier. The name itself sounds expensive, doesn't it? It conjures images of royalty, red carpets, impossibly large diamonds, basically peak Parisian luxury. For over 170 years, they've been the go-to jeweler for anyone who is anyone. The jeweler of kings and the king of jewelers, as King Edward VII famously put it. And Eddie knew a thing or two about bling. So when you think Cartier, you probably think, well, jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, rings that cost more than your house. And you wouldn't be wrong. But here's the twist, the little secret whispered in the hallowed halls of horology. The legendary jeweler, almost by accident, stumbled into becoming one of the most influential and important watchmakers of the 20th century. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, right? Like finding out your Michelin star chef is secretly amazing at fixing plumbing. They weren't trying to compete with the serious Swiss folks up their mountaintop workshops, meticulously crafting complications. Cartier was busy making shiny things for fancy people. Yet somehow, they gave us the first pilot's watch, the first proper manned wristwatch as we know it today, and designs like the tank and the Pasha that are still stone-cold icons. How did this happen? How did the ultimate luxury jeweler become an accidental revolutionary in the world of watches? Well, grab your loupe, or maybe just a stiff drink, because we're diving into the glittering and surprisingly innovative history of Cartier watches. Paris, 1847. While Karl Marx was busy writing the Communist Manifesto, a young jeweler named Louis-François Cartier was pursuing a slightly different path. He took over his master Adolphe Picard's workshop and began crafting exquisite jewelry for the French aristocracy. Probably not what Marx had in mind for the workers seizing the means of production, but hey, different strokes. Louis-François had impeccable timing, and not just for watchmaking. He established Cartier right as the Second French Empire was beginning, when Emperor Napoleon III and his fashion-forward wife, Eugénie, were transforming Paris into the world's capital of luxury and style. Suddenly, everyone who was anyone needed to look the part. The business grew rapidly, and Louis-François' son Alfred took over in 1874, followed by Alfred's three sons, Louis, Pierre, and Jacques, who would truly transform Cartier into a global powerhouse. Louis ran the Paris shop, Pierre took New York, and Jacques handled London. The Cartier brothers, basically the original luxury multinational corporation. By 1904, Cartier had royal warrants from courts across Europe. King Edward VII of England famously called them the jeweler of kings and the king of jewelers, which, let's be honest, is kind of an endorsement you immediately put on your business card. Edward ordered 27 tiaras for his coronation alone. 27! That's basically a tiara for every day of the month, minus a field day or, I don't know, casual February. But here's the thing, watches weren't really their focus. Sure, they made beautiful pocket watches and delicate pendant watches for women, but they were essentially jewelry that happened to tell the time. Decorative objects first, timepieces second. And that might have been the end of the story. Cartier, legendary jeweler, occasional maker of pretty but unremarkable timepieces. Except, a chance friendship was about to change everything and accidentally revolutionize how we all tell time. Meet Alberto Santos Dumont, Brazilian aviation pioneer, Paris celebrity, and a man with a very specific problem. In the early 1900s, Santos Dumont was the toast of Paris, famous for flying his personal airship around the Eiffel Tower. Yes, you heard that right, personal airship. This was a time when having your own dirigible was the billionaire equivalent of today's super yachts. Santos Dumont was basically the Elon Musk of the Belle Époque, minus the tweets, of course. Santos Dumont was also a regular at Maxim's restaurant in Paris, where he often dined with his good friend Louis Cartier. During one of these dinners in 1904, Santos Dumont complained about a specific challenge. When piloting his aircraft, he needed both hands on the controls, making it impossible to pull out his pocket watch to check the time. First world problems, 1904 edition. Louis Cartier, ever the problem solver, had an idea. What if he created a watch that could be worn on the wrist, allowing Santos Dumont to check the time while keeping both hands on the controls? Now, wristwatches did exist at this time, but they were considered feminine jewelry, delicate, decorative items worn exclusively by women. Men carried pocket watches, tucked away in their waistcoats, because masculinity was apparently very fragile back then. Cartier's genius was to design something completely new, a purpose-built masculine wristwatch with a distinctive square bezel and exposed screws that echo the industrial aesthetic of the era. It was practical, legible, and had a certain mechanical honesty to it. The Santos was born, the first men's wristwatch designed specifically for the purpose of telling time during an activity. Santos Dumont was thrilled with his new timepiece and wore it religiously during his flights. On October 23, 1906, he made history by flying his 14 bis aircraft for a distance of 60 meters at a height of 2 to 3 meters. The first publicly witnessed unaided takeoff and flight by a heavier-than-air aircraft in Europe. And there on his wrist, his Cartier watch, keeping time as he made aviation history. Word spread quickly. He was this dashing aviator, this celebrity innovator sporting a wristwatch, and suddenly the idea didn't seem so feminine anymore. When Cartier made the Santos available to the public in 1911, it was revolutionary, not because of any horological innovation, but because it completely changed how men thought about wearing watches. The Santos did something remarkable. It transformed the wristwatch from a woman's accessory into an essential tool for the modern man. And it did so not through technical innovation, but through design and cultural influence. Cartier the jeweler had accidentally kick-started a revolution in how we tell time. But this was just the beginning of Cartier's accidental watchmaking revolution, because a decade later, as the world was engulfed in war, Louis Cartier would find inspiration in an unlikely place, the battlefield. While the Santos was born from the skies, Cartier's next icon found its inspiration in the mud and trenches of World War I. In 1917, Louis Cartier saw the Renault FT tanks rolling through Paris. Now, most people looked at these metal beasts and saw, well, war machines. Louis Cartier, however, looked at the tank's footprint, the square cockpit section flanked by the long parallel tracks, and saw, well, a watch. Only a jeweler, right, sees a weapon of war and thinks, that would make a lovely timepiece. It sounds absurd, but that geometric simplicity, that blend of straight lines and curves, sparked an idea. He designed a watch where the case seamlessly integrated into the lugs, creating those distinctive vertical bars or brancards that mimic the tank treads. It was clean, minimalistic, and radically different from the round watches dominating the era. The first prototype was presented to General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force in Europe, in 1918. A pretty baller move, gifting a watch inspired by tank to a top general. Talk about targeted marketing. When the tank officially launched in 1919, it was an instant classic. Its design was pure Art Deco before Art Deco was even a thing. It perfectly captured the spirit of the age, a move towards modernity, clean lines, and functional elegance. Unlike the Santos, which was born from a specific need, the tank was pure design, an aesthetic statement. And people loved it. It became their watch to own. Rudolph Valentino famously insisted on wearing his tank in the 1926 film The Son of the Sheik, even though it was historically inaccurate. When the costume department protested, he basically said, "Screw historical accuracy, I look good." And he wasn't wrong. From Clark Gable to Cary Grant, Andy Warhol, who famously said he wore his tank not to tell the time, but because it was the watch to wear, to Princess Diana, Jackie Kennedy, the list of iconic tank wearers is insane. It transcended gender, trends, and time. It just worked. Over the years, Cartier spun the tank into a whole family. The tank Louis Cartier, the Centré, the Américain, the Française, each subtle variation of the perfect original theme. It's like the Porsche 911 of watches, instantly recognizable, constantly refined, never losing its core identity. So first the Santos, born in aviation, then the tank, inspired by warfare. Cartier was proving that great watch design could come from anywhere, driven by practicality or pure aesthetics. But their next big hit would involve a bit more mystery. Now we enter the realm where marketing and history get a bit blurry. The story goes that in 1931 or 32, the Pasha of Marrakech, Tamir el Glaoui, a powerful North African ruler and notorious bon vivant, approached Cartier with a request. He wanted a waterproof watch, elegant enough for a man of his stature but robust enough for swimming. Cartier supposedly created a special gold watch with the protective grid over the dial and a chain-secured, screwed-down crown cap. A beautiful solution that kept water out while maintaining their signature Cartier elegance. It was like a diving watch for people who'd never actually dive, but might occasionally get champagne splashed on their wrists. It's a great story. There's just one tiny problem. There's virtually no evidence it actually happened. No records, no surviving original watch, just a photograph from 1943 of a watch that kinda sorta looks like what would later become the Pasha. The closest thing to proof is Cartier's official statement that the watch pays tribute to the Pasha of Marrakesh, which, if you read between the lines, is basically saying inspired by rather than made for. But hey, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? Whether the original Pasha watch existed or not, the legend was too good to waste. Fast forward to 1985, when Cartier was under the leadership of Alain-Dominique Perrin, a marketing genius who had already revitalized the brand with the Must Cartier line. Perrin enlisted the help of legendary watch designer Gerald Genter, the man behind icons like the Audemars Piguet Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus, to reimagine his possibly mythical Pasha watch for the modern era. And what they created was peak 1980s luxury. Bold, distinctive, and just a bit over the top. The 1985 Pasha was a statement piece. A large, for the time, 38mm round case that had a distinctive protective grid over the dial, the screw-down crown cap with its little chain attachment, and those unusual lugs. It was both sporty and dressy, masculine yet decorative. It was, in other words, perfectly Cartier and perfectly 1980s. The Pasha was an immediate hit, especially with the greed is good crowd. It spawned numerous variations, chronographs, GMT models, even a perpetual calendar. But its most distinctive feature was probably the Figaro bracelet, a heavy, distinctive link design that screamed, "I've made some questionable financial decisions, but this isn't one of them." So was the Pasha's origin story real or just clever marketing? We may never know for sure. By the way, it doesn't matter. The myth became reality when the watch hit the market and found its audience. Sometimes in luxury, the story is as important as the product itself. For decades, Cartier was content being the master of iconic designs. The Santos, the Tank, the Pasha, these weren't just watches, they were style statements, instantly recognizable symbols of luxury. But in the early 2000s, something shifted. Perhaps feeling a bit left out of the serious watch nerd conversations, or maybe just wanting to prove they could play in the big leagues, Cartier decided to get serious about haute horlogerie, high watchmaking. They invested heavily in establishing a state-of-the-art manufacturing in Switzerland and launching the Collection Privée Cartier Paris, CPCP, a series of limited edition watches featuring high-end mechanical movements sourced from prestigious makers like Piaget, Jaeger-LeCoultre, and even Patek Philippe through collaborations. This was Cartier saying, okay, we can do complicated stuff too, you know. Then came the real flex, the ID1 and ID2 concept watches. These weren't for sale, they were technological showcases, laboratories on the wrist. The ID1 featured components made from exotic materials like zero-dur and carbon crystal, eliminating the need for lubrication and regulation. The ID2 went even further, with a vacuum-sealed case to reduce friction and boost power reserve to an insane 32 days. 32 days! That's longer than some celebrity managers, and just 5 days longer than what Edward VII would need to wear all of his tiaras. While these concepts didn't hit mass production, the technology trickled down. Cartier started developing more in-house movements, creating stunning skeletonized watches, mysterious double tourbillons, and other complications that proved they had the technical chops to back up the design prowess. They were finally bridging the gap between jeweler and serious watchmaker. Of course, let's be real, most people still walk into Cartier for a love bracelet or a classic tank. The high complication stuff is impressive, but it's not really the core business. It's like Ferrari making an SUV. Yes, they can do it, and it's probably technically brilliant, but you still think of them for their sleek sports cars. Cartier remains, first and foremost, a master of design. But their journey into serious watchmaking adds another fascinating layer to their story. It shows a willingness to evolve, to innovate, and to prove that elegance and technical substance aren't mutually exclusive. So here we are, over 170 years after Louis-François Cartier took over their little Parisian workshop. What started as a jeweler catering to aristocrats somehow, almost accidentally, became one of the most influential forces in watchmaking history. The Santos revolutionized how men wore watches, transforming them from pocket accessories to wrist essentials. The Tank created a design language so perfect, it's barely changed for over a century. The Pasha showed how a good story, true or not, can be as valuable as the product itself. And their modern creations prove that technical substance can coexist with timeless style. What makes Cartier's watchmaking journey so fascinating is that they weren't trying to compete with the established Swiss manufacturers. They weren't obsessive with chronometric precision or horological one-upmanship. They were jewelers who appreciated watches as objects of beauty first, timekeeping second. And in doing so, they created something completely different, watches that transcend their function to become genuine cultural icons. It's a reminder that sometimes the most innovative ideas come from outsiders, from people who are unbound by the conventional wisdom of an industry. Cartier didn't know they weren't supposed to make square watches or put exposed screws in a bezel or attach chains to crown caps. And thank goodness for that. In a world obsessed with smart watches that count your steps and buzz with notifications, there's something wonderfully refreshing about Cartier's approach to time. Their watches don't do much beyond telling the time and look absolutely stunning while doing it. They remind us that sometimes style is substance. The jeweler of kings accidentally became watchmaking royalty. And over a century later, their creations continue to adorn wrists around the world. Not because they're the most technically advanced or the most precise, but because they're simply undeniably Cartier. And that, as it turns out, is more than enough.